Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP, in association with Savage Unfiltered Podcast, TheLibertyBeacon.com, and I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. As Listen Note says, there are 168.9 million plus podcast episodes available out there for you to listen to. So I really appreciate you tuning into mine. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show. Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics, Season 1, Episode 22. If you're watching on the YouTube or Rumble video channel, you'll see I have a guest. It is Rick Walker, and we'll get to him in a second and why he's here. But today is one of those odd episodes. I normally, if I have a guest, record a segment that they would be segment 2 following a lead-in. Well, today we're just going raw with Rick the whole episode. So this is going to be a little different kind of episode. And the topic of the LibertyBeacon.com piece, gray area or gray areas. Part 1, there will be a part 2. This is planned to drop around November 18th. So without further ado, let me just introduce Rick Walker and have him explain who he is. Oh, a Canuck. Back-to-back Canucks it's going to be. I thought I'd get some Canadian perspective in the show. So please welcome Rick Walker. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your show.
Well, thank you for having me on your program tonight, Joseph. It's an honor. And I'm a Canuck. I'm Canadian. I used to work for CTV News in Canada for about 25 years. Left the mainstream media quite a long time ago, about 10 years ago, do some automotive journalism. But these days, my main focus is Maverick News, which is our online free speech, free media oriented news platform. And we cover a lot of international news, U.S. news, and Canadian news, of course, because I'm right here in Canada. And the Canadian news is always, in one way or another, connected directly back to the U.S. of A.
Which is why I wanted to have you. And free speech, as far as YouTube Canada will let you be free speech, which is even more strict and censored than YouTube USA.
That is true.
Touchy in both places. Let me get your reaction to this. I'm got my notes here.
Okay.
For those on video could see it. If you're listening on audio only, maybe you can hear the paper rustling. I don't do scripted, but I do notes so I could try to get things in. I want to read this specifically regarding gray area or gray areas, and we will do a few examples. But things are never usually pure black and white, right and wrong, and good and evil. And those who, of course, are evil always want to play the gray area to pretend they're not evil, right? And whether it be this or anything else, there are often various different camps of people with varying own personal agendas wanting to muddy the waters for their own gain. And we need to be smart enough to dig into the why, the motivations someone is saying what, as part of the determinations of whether genuine or even factual, or spin and false narratives or lies. Your initial reaction to that?
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little? Yeah.
So you want my reaction to what? That there are gray areas and sometimes people who are evil exploit the the ambiguity that comes from
Yes,
sort of
yes,
dipping into the gray area of
yeah.
things? Yes, they
Well,
do that.
yeah,
Yes.
most definitely. Well, I'm going to start with an oddball example right out the gate.
Okay.
All right. The word gray is a gray area in itself. If you're using Oxford English or American English, it can be spelled Gray or
Yes.
Grey, right? And spell checker, like I'm holding a Microsoft document here. And as I was
Yeah.
doing my article, I have my rough notes. It's not completely done yet. This recording may influence what lands up in the final draft.
Okay.
But the spell checkers, and why I say in my book how to write a book and get it published, hints, tips, and techniques, you need a professional editor, because the spell and grammar checkers, no matter how sophisticated, still aren't sophisticated enough to say, like, I take the Merriam-Webster write-up on the difference, gray, A-E, and therefore in the document, it's spelled both ways. And the AI isn't even smart enough to say, there's a dichotomy here. There's a discrepancy. Do you really mean to spell it two different ways? So the word gray is a gray area in and of itself of language.
Yes. I'm not exactly sure where we're going with this, Joseph. Yeah, are you trying to like lead us into some broader discussion in politics? Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah,
here?
That's definitely where we're going to go. That's just kind of my initial broad overall definition of a gray area can be indeed.
Well, sure, because if you want to talk about gray areas, especially as it relates, well, it doesn't really matter what it relates to. If you're talking about politics, everything, everything in life is a gray area. All perspectives are different. Everybody looks at the world in a slightly different way. That's why I, as a conservative, I believe in individual rights and freedoms. I believe that every individual is unique. I don't like identity politics because it sort of slots people into specific categories, groups people together. And while people on the woke left always say, that diversity is our strength, in reality, there's not that much diversity within identity politics. True diversity comes from individuality. That's where you find true diversity, because now you're talking about every single individual being a unique person. And we can be looking at exactly the same thing. For instance, I could hold up this cup and I see it with on this side of the screen, but as you're looking at it, you're probably seeing it on the opposite side of the screen. If you're standing just a little bit to the left of something, you're seeing it from a slightly different angle. And so that's partly why you can have people look at a political issue or even a political event. And I, as a reporter, can go to a political event and my report might be entirely different than a report that's coming from someone else with a different political perspective, another reporter who's doing a story on exactly the same speech from exactly the same politician at exactly the same time, but they stand a little to my left and their world experience, their worldview is just is different than mine. So they perceive the language, they perceive everything in a different way. And so when they write their article, they express themselves differently. They see it differently. Everything in life, it doesn't matter what it is you look at, you're seeing it from your perspective, which is entirely unique, which is why everything in life is actually a gray area. And I mean, you can really get down into some very deep conversations about science and philosophy as it relates to this very issue, and even delve into the areas of what is reality, because everything revolves around that. Like, what is reality? and that all stems from different perspectives on everything.
And
Okay.
why I opened with you need to dig into the why and motivations. There can still be different perspectives from an honest internal different perspective, as opposed to an absolute by choice leftist bent motivation agenda. So yeah, you're definitely in the spirit here. And the next thing I have on my note is like the law. We recognize mitigating circumstances of gray areas, like Les Mis, right? Most people know either the book or the play or the musical or whatever, but we recognize negligent homicide is different than premeditated murder. And stealing a loaf of bread, to quote Les Mis, you don't punish the same as a murderer. There's varying degrees and aspects within the law. Like here in the US, I have no doubt you've heard AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I know that's not very polite to go that route with that nickname, but you know, that's my hashtag for her. She's just a loon, and and she's out talking about people stealing Gucci bags and Nike shoes as a Les Mis example. No, they're not stealing bread. They're not looking. You look at some of these people, they're obese running around. They're not starving. They're not stealing bread. You cannot excuse them with that Les Mis example and that gray area in the law that, again, for her motivation is a leftist agenda. Your thoughts on that?
Yes.
He's doing this on purpose because
no,
I
just
give a yes or no answer on his
show. That's true, but I mean, you're expressing yourself very clearly, and you're very articulate. I understand your point. You fleshed it out very well. This is obviously an issue that's facing, especially I think, the United States right now. The woke left sort of finding excuses for people committing crimes under the idea that they've been so victimized over generations that criminal activity is actually justified. And no, I don't agree with that at all. Theft is theft is theft. So
again, except for mitigating circumstances. Yes, stealing a loaf of bread because you have a starving kid is entirely different than these slobs out there stealing Gucci and Nike.
Well, sure, yes, and that's why we have codified law, so that and legal precedent in place, so that judges know how to deal with these cases on a case-by-case basis, and there are precedents set through various court decisions over time, so they know what kind of sentencing to hand out.
My next thought here is Bill Clinton, and I'm sure you remember, right? Depends on what the definition of is. No, it doesn't. You perjured yourself before Congress. And again, the left, because of their agenda, want to excuse the lying because it was about sex. And he's trying to play, take the kids out of the room. A blowjob really isn't sex. So I really wasn't lying. I really didn't perjure myself. It depends on what the definition of is. And that's bull. If you think that the sex with an intern is no big deal, own up to it. Yes, I had sex with an intern in the Oval Office. It may not have been proper, but it is what it is. It was just sex. It has nothing to do with my ability to perform as president or not.
Yes. But he didn't inhale either. So
There, Rick, is a great, perfect response. Now, have you heard of Jamal Bowman? He's the guy that pulled the fire alarm the other day. Okay, you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
He literally interrupted a vote of Congress, tried to an insurrection, if you will.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Literally, the letter of the law tried to interfere with the congressional business far more than anyone on January 6th did.
Yeah.
So he needs to be censured, expelled, and a resolution drafted, sent to Merrick Garland, who will, of course, ignore it, demanding he be prosecuted like these January 6th folk. If this happened in your parliament, you'd be demanding prosecution, correct?
Depends on if the person pulling the fire alarm is a Nazi or not.
I don't want to go down that road. Yeah, let's not go there. That's
maybe this
area.
Maybe he thought he was in a movie theater and he was he felt compelled to shout fire.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I actually have that further down my notes. Let me finish with the insurrection per se.
Sure.
Because like Wisconsin, literally leftists occupied the Wisconsin legislature several years ago when Scott Walker was governor to interrupt proceedings, an insurrection, a literal occupation for a week plus time, not a few hours wandering around and then left. Nothing done about that, of course. Here in Michigan, Governor Whitlis, or Whitler, as I call her, was a member of the Michigan House at the time the Capitol went on lockdown because leftists were trying to do the same thing here. And she literally broke the lockdown, opened her office window to let insurrectionists in, and yet nothing happens. But regarding the fire, on thelibertybeacon.com, I've got a piece about yelling fire in a crowded theater, because to me that's a farce. And you had on your show when I was on the other day, who I contend is a leftist. Rush Limbaugh talked about this all the time. Media Matters tells leftists to masquerade as Republicans, which is why the guy didn't give his name and wanted to hide his face. He was pretending to be a Republican, in my mind, because he agreed with leftist dictates at every turn. And he tried to use the yell fire in a crowded theater. And no, that is not speech. That is not opinion. That is fraud in the inducement and incitement if there is not fire. That's not speech.
He really got under your skin, didn't he? You've been going on about that guy ever since the other night. That's amazing.
Well, yeah,
really pissed you off.
He was really, at every turn, he showed he was not a small government Republican. And the other thing that
I don't remember him trying to present himself that way.
Oh, he said it several times.
Oh, that's right. He did. He said he was a Republican. Right.
And the other thing that really irked me is, do you remember how many times he said, I'm highly educated, and so are all my friends. Unlike me and you, the rubes, the rednecks, the unwashed.
Yeah, the toothless hayseed hicks from the back 40.
But what he really is a well-educated, indoctrinated, trained Pavlovian dog. And anytime the bell rings, he bites.
Well, people watching this program didn't get a chance to see that show. I suppose you could go on onto my channel and see that to get some context. But I mean, I don't know if I'm afraid to comment too much because I wouldn't want to confuse people or talk about something that they don't have a frame of reference on without having previously seen what it is we're talking about. But
yeah, I will make sure I link to that show either on my live YouTube channel. It's still on my YouTube channel under the live tab, since I streamed it live while we were on together, as long as YouTube leaves it, because of all those, idiosyncrasies that they don't like us to talk about. They may pull it, but I know you put up an edited version. I'll go grab the link to the edited version. So if
it's the unedited version is up on Rumble. So if anybody wants to see the whole thing, it's on there, and on Facebook too. Facebook doesn't bother me too much with stuff like that. At least they haven't so far. And except that they took down our whole news page in Canada because of censorship laws in Canada. So you can't see our news page in Canada anymore. You can see it in the USA, but I can't even watch my own content because my page is blocked to me in Canada. But when I stream to it, people in other countries around the world can see it. How insane is that?
Yeah.
Very.
Well, tell us about, this is off the topic now, but let's go there. You don't have the First Amendment as it exists here in our Constitution. And you guys just passed a law. I know Miss Liz on another show I discussed with her, passed a law.
Yes.
Supposedly about protecting news feed content and the providers, so that you have to pay for their content. But what it really is backdoor censorship and preventing things from getting to the people. Is that how you see that?
There are two pieces of legislation. One is Bill C-18, and the other is Bill C-11. In a nutshell, what it is the government is forcing social media companies to, on the one hand, give preference to mainstream legacy media outlets in search engine algorithms to push them up in the search engine rankings on the search engine results pages, and therefore suppress smaller independent outlets in the interest of what they say is Canadian content. So they want to put Canadian content up top. So they basically, if you search for any news content, they want that stuff, CBC, CTV, Global News, etc., to pop up first. The other thing that they're trying to do is make social media companies pay the mainstream legacy media fees for the news content that they publish on the social media platforms. Facebook has told the government that they are not going to participate in that. They've refused to pay. So they have said, we're just not going to carry any more news content in Canada. We're just not going to carry it. We don't need it. It's not what it doesn't make business sense for us to do it. So inadvertently, as an unintended consequence of their new legislation, we now have a situation where Facebook has effectively banned all news content, both independent and mainstream legacy news content, period. It's purged it from Canada.
Yeah.
So everything is blocked. So now I'm in this very unusual situation where we had this Facebook Maverick News Facebook page with a pretty sizable list of subscribers. And now nobody in Canada can see it. And yet you in the USA can see that very same page. It is not blocked on your side.
Right.
It's very strange.
Now,
also, go ahead.
I'm a former IT guy. So this to me, and I have another The Liberty Beacon piece about leftists and never realizing or paying attention to the supposed natural law of unintended consequences. Or in my mind, they know, they just play dumb. And I think that's happening here. They want it suppressed because they don't want people to have access to the content. They want them, like we discussed on your show, doped and dumb and uninformed. But as a former IT guy, I dare say there's the phrase, that's not a bug, it's a feature, right? To keep you away from the news. But they're using the old music laws. For those who don't know, I'm in Detroit, so I'm across from Windsor, Ontario, and Canada has always had special laws that Canadian stations must play X number of Canadian content to prevent US artists from overloading Canadian stations. You know, that's good to some degree. I got to hear a lot of Canadian artists I would not otherwise have heard, but it seems to me like they're trying to twist that to impose this as
They are
flag of sort, a
yeah.
backdoor censorship.
See, Canada has always had strange regulations like that would probably seem strange to you in the United States. And it's because we traditionally, with, regular legacy media or mediums like radio, TV, newspapers, Canada being a huge country right on the border with, right up against the United States, you have very powerful media. Your population is 10 times ours, and we're bombarded with US signals. So the Canadian government, in order to, because there's so much competition, if you will, from US broadcasters, they've said to Canadian broadcasters, you must provide so much Canadian content, even Canadian news. When I was working for CTV all those years, my job was really only there because the government forced CTV to have a news bureau in the city that I worked in. If it wasn't for that, their CTV probably would not have bothered. They would have done, news all out of Toronto or something like that. They wouldn't have had reporters in other cities. So in order to get their broadcast licenses, they would have to have what they call a promise of performance declaration, and they have to promise to provide certain amount of news coverage, all Canadian content. It goes on and on. So there are regulations that have been in place like that for a long time. And they're trying to basically do the same thing now with the internet. And it's having these crazy unintended consequences because the internet is not television, and it's a completely new era.
Again, I dare say it's not a bug, it's a feature. These fascists want that control. And again, we would see that in the US and stand up and say, whoa, you are completely interfering in free markets, and be outraged at that. But a geography lesson for those perhaps in southern United States who may not recognize or realize what us in the northern states do that border with Canada. Canada, you look at a map, is a huge landmass, but 90% of your population is in 1/10 of the lower part of your provinces.
That's
Therefore, like you said, our northern states, airwaves and influence bombards the 90% of your population.
Yes. That's exactly right. That's why I actually, for my automotive television show, we broadcast out of U.S. stations, including WKBW Buffalo. So my automotive program runs on that station, and then it gets picked up by, it's terrestrial, so it beams back over into Canada by off air, and then gets picked up by Canadian cable companies and satellite companies, and then gets beamed across the country that way. It's because WKBW is sitting right there on the border. So I do that show that way. Anyway, that's way off topic. You get me back on track, Joseph. Sorry.
This is, you're again Canadian, so that's why I want you on and your perspective. You know who Tom MacDonald, the rapper, is, the former wrestler, right?
No, I don't. I
Oh,
don't think
no,
so.
oh, you don't. Okay.
I'm not into rap and I don't really watch wrestling. So
Yeah.
I'm at a bit of a loss.
Well, he is a Canadian rapper living in the U.S. Who knows? He may have become a U.S. citizen by now, but he's
Okay.
controversial because he does a lot of political content. So
Okay.
he leans right, but I dare not say he's a conservative and definitely not a Republican.
Okay.
So there's the cancel culture always going at him and that, but he's purely independent and sells everything direct. But I bring him up for this odd gray area and back to the odd areas in the law, right? We all understand and recognize as a male, you do not get to beat up on a female, right? We pretty much call it patriarchy if you like, leftist loons, but the law generally recognizes that a male is indeed far more stronger, and you don't get to abuse a girlfriend, a spouse, a daughter. That is a special carve out and protection in the law. Well, Tom has a song, maybe you could look it up when we're done here, called Hittin A Woman. And that's why I brought that up. And one of the lines is, you think you're a bad bitch, right? But you know how that would play out in a fight. He's talking about a woman who's goading him, and or in some cases, you can see a man is charged with assault, but clearly when the video comes out, he's defending himself against an aggressive female. And we don't get that benefit of the doubt because of the patriarchal mindset, one might say.
Yes.
I knew that was coming.
Don't hit women.
Right. But
Yeah.
I mean, if a woman is, and you know, men in general are stronger than women, which is indeed why I want to protect women's sports. And biological males have no place in female sports. It was just on the news. There is a female at a college playing in the male college NCAA football, first ever woman non-kicker role playing. Now, generally women are weaker, but if they're strong enough,
well,
let them play. Like Ronda Rousey would absolutely kick my butt any time of the day or night. She could sit on the couch eating Krispy Kremes for 3 years, and I could go into training and she'd still kick my butt. So for every rule, there is an exception, and that in of itself gets us back to gray areas.
Well, yes. If but I'm Canadian, so you know, when I was a kid playing hockey growing up,
I played hockey too, so we have that in common.
Yeah. So girls hockey was just sort of, you know, in its infancy in Canada. They were trying to get more girls to play minor league hockey. And you know, I played on what they called a competitive team. So we were a travel team. And so they had this girls team, and they were much older, much bigger, right? And they wanted to play against us. And so we did. They arranged a game and we played this girls hockey team. I don't know exactly where this story is going, but I can only tell you that we cleaned their clocks, right? Like we kept scoring and scoring and scoring and scoring and scoring. And it felt really bad because like, I don't know what the score at the end was. It was like, I don't know, 25-0 or something. It was like, it was brutal at the time.
That brings to mind.
That felt like I was hitting a girl.
Yeah.
At the time, you know?
That brings to my mind the U.S. women's soccer team and that dumb bitch. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, Rapinoe, that I can't stand. Glad she's retired. A lot of U.S. people were glad they got their clock clean and they made an early exit. because of her interjecting the politics into sports. When you're there to represent your country, just represent your country. Kneeling for the anthem, but the U.S. women's soccer team played a high school boys soccer team, and same thing, got their freaking clock cleaned.
I got to tell you though, Joseph, I got to tell you something. Okay. So, well, that did happen. I have to acknowledge that at the time, that girls hockey team, they just, the minor league hockey system wasn't really set up for them yet. So they just didn't have the same training. They didn't have the same, a lot of them hadn't started as young as we had, right? So they were at a severe disadvantage, even though they were much older than us. We were like little kids, and they were probably about 4 years older than us, and we still cleaned their clocks. But my aunt Betty, who's, God bless her soul, no longer with us, she taught me a lesson in the most severe way. I wanted to play baseball. I want to play catch with my dad, but we had company, and no one would play catch with me. I was just a little kid. And she said, well, I'll play with you. And I said, well, you can't play baseball. You're a girl. So she said, well, yes, I can. And then what we did is she took the baseball bat, and I had to throw the ball to her. And I'm just playing in my front yard, right? And she kept hitting that ball. She'd whack that ball, and she'd hit a home run after home. She'd knock it all the way out into, a mile away, and then I'd have to go get the stupid ball, bring it back.
You something, huh?
Oh yeah, and then she was like, "Yay, home run!" And I'd throw it again, and then she'd make me run and go get that damn ball. And so I learned a lesson that day that girls can play baseball.
I'm glad you made that caveat about your training level versus the female hockey, because I had a younger sister. She wanted to play hockey. I mean, she wanted to be on the team with me. I was a goaltender. My dad coached many of our teams. But yeah, the women's USA soccer team trained supposed going on to be professional soccer players, losing to a high school amateur boys team who just took anyone and every, unlike the Olympic team who supposedly picks the best and the brightest, their random team cleaned their clock. And since we have hockey in common, do you know who Manon Rhéaume is?
Manon Rhéaume?
Yeah, French Canadian, first female to be signed to the NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Unfortunately, they didn't bring her up to the NHL. They kept her in the farm team. I was hoping.
Well, she played at least one game in the NHL, if I recall.
I think it was a preseason, though, not a standard regular season, so it wasn't official. But I'm glad you know her. And I've got autographed pictures of her. She's an idol of mine. So I'm all for women's sports. And when they can play with the men, please do. But not Leah Thomas, who is 600 ranking in male swimmers, all of a sudden breaking female swimming records. No, claiming to be a woman. No. Okay, so with that, we're now like 40 minutes in. My shows, I try not to go much more than 40 minutes. So let me close and say, yes, remember, this is conjunction with thelibertybeacon.com. The things usually a lot of gray area, part 1, gray areas, part 2, and that show will be with Miss Liz, another Canuckian, as I like to just lovingly, jokingly call them. But please, too, check out Biden Flips Off the SCOTUS, both affirmative action and student debt editions. Norton v. Shelby, a very important case regarding government overreach and usurpation. The deep state alphabet agencies long either unconstitutional or overstepping their congressional authority. Bidenomics, Part 1 and Part 2, remembering our freedoms beyond the 4th of July, that's there. More recently, censorship of social media still. I'm still, my main account, banned on Twitter. So even though Elon's there, you can't get a human to talk to get it undone.
You're banned on Twitter?
Yeah, I have at JLenardAuthor, a backup, just a little piddly account that's mainly meant to promote my books and this show. And then lastly, I'll mention a piece on ranked choice voting. I urge you, that's season 1, episode 2. I urge people to check out that article and that show because Charlie Kirk doesn't tell you everything. He only gives you his little thing so he can attack McConnell, rightfully so. But like Paul Harvey says, you listen to my show, read that article, you will know the rest of the story. So thank you, Rick. Please tell us again where people can find you if they want to reach out or to watch your show.
Well, we're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Odyssey, the main ones, right? Rumble's where we really want people to go. And you can always find us at MaverickNews.ca or MaverickNewsChannel.com. That will take you to our website. You can see a lot of our videos on there. You can also find the link to Rumble right on the header. So I encourage you to just head over there. And that's the easiest way to find us. We have a growing community, a real family developing over there. It's a lively discussion every night. Come on over, join us, jump in the chat, join the Maverick family, and we actually go through the process of actually knighting people from time to time too. So if you're a freedom fighter and someone who believes in using your superpowers for good and never evil,
sign me up.
Then you might just end up being a Maverick Knight if you
that would be
Maverick News.
Such a badge of honor. But like your brevity, the soul of wit, and your yeses, I'll conclude by just saying one word: exit. Bye.
Ciao for now, brown cow.
Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast and Savaged Unfiltered. Maybe even go back a few years and dig up some old The Patriot angles. Share episodes. We need your help to grow the show. Thank you for having tuned into ChristiTutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via terrorstrikes.info/shop. And you can obviously learn more about the very non-traditional or fluffy style Christian book, but a Christian book nonetheless. Also, please tune in to Savage Unfiltered Podcast, of which I am a co-host, and be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. In addition to seeing the corresponding thelibertybeacon.com piece referenced in any episode of ChristiTutionalist Podcast, see to the show transcript on podcast platforms that provide access to it, like Buzzsprout, at tinyurl.com/ChristiTutionalist for additional bonus material there in the transcript. Thank you. Take care. God bless.